Hello everybody and welcome to another Doctor Who review. This time it is a Big Finish audio review and it's The Shadow of the Scourge. So here we are, we've got the 13th audio adventure from Big Finish Productions. Hard to believe I've got to 13 already. Now this is kind of like what they would class as like that extra story that they would do, because they do 13 releases a year. Well, that's what their plan was. And this is like their 13th story, it's like their extra, because this is the second McCoy story in a row. But instead of having Mel, they've just going to kind of sidestep into this kind of interesting universe of the Virgin New Adventures. Now, the Virgin New Adventures, if you don't know, is effectively the novelisation continuation of the series when it stopped in 1989 and ran for 6 years, with novels that got the Doctor going darker, deeper, bringing in people like Benny Summerfield into the canon, and obviously Ace is still there and tags along for the vast majority of the adventures, to be fair. So this is interesting, seeing the dynamic between the three of them. Ace is obviously older, the Doctor's obviously a little bit older, and of course Bernice is fairly new to the whole... Well, she's not fairly new, she has travelled with the Doctor a while in this part, but she's fairly new to us in regards to the Doctor Who universe properly in a Doctor Who adventure. If you haven't listened to the Bernice Summerfield monthly adventures before this, she comes in, you might be slightly aware of her, but you don't know the background. And I think this case, because I've listened to a few of the Bernice Summerfield adventures at this point, I know the character enough to accept her and appreciate the writing of this story. But it's difficult for a newbie to come into this one, and it does pull it down just a little in regards to the way things work. So, the 13th Big Finish monthly adventure, and in some ways probably a sidestep into a slightly different universe of Doctor Who, into the novel universe, the Virgin New Adventures to be exact. This story is set between two Virgin New Adventure novels and stars the 7th Doctor Sylvester McCoy, along with Sophie Order's Ace and Lisa Bauman as Bernice Summerfield. Each of them have done audio dramas before, of course. It was Lisa Bauman's Bernice that got Big Finish the contract to do Doctor Who audios all back in 1999, because they started with Bernice Summerfield Adventures back in 1998. So it's interesting that this is the first time, it's not the last time, but it's the first time Bernice Summerfield makes an appearance in the main monthly range of Doctor Who. And it's a welcome addition. Story is as follows. The Doctor ends up in a hotel in Kent, where there's 3 separate conferences going on. One for cross-stitching, one for time manipulation and photon device, and one for a famous psychic lady who's doing seances. They all have bits of despair and doubt in them, and they've all been used by an interdimensional being called the Scourge. They are used and become the main advance party for the Scourge to come through into this universe and devour all the humans through using their despair and their fears. The Doctor seems to have done a deal with the devil and has got them to come over, and he gives them Earth. It was a way of the Doctor trying to stop the Scourge from coming through because he knew they were coming. However, he gets a bit too far into it and his initial plan doesn't work, and he ends up more or less starting to convert into one of them. Benny manages to use the psychic Annie to get into the Doctor's mind and finds out the Doctor is losing the battle. Benny then manages to get Ace to go up to the TARDIS, and Ace is there as the muscle, as always she seems to be in these stories, and is part of a small motley bunch of people who are involved in creating a defence against them. The Doctor starts to lose his mind and almost loses entirely, but Benny comes back in after saving Annie from being a Scourge and getting her back into her own mind to an extent, and manages to get the Doctor out of his mind. The Scourge feed on fear and feed on the dimensions. They manage to get themselves infested into it, so they're able to fight the Scourge, and eventually they win. Let's go through the characters and let's just go through each of them. We've got the Doctor, played by Sylvester McCoy. I think McCoy loves playing the darker stuff. The Fearmonger is a good example of the 7th Doctor being in his dark moments, and I think it does show that this is the part of the Doctor that McCoy really has a big advantage with. I think it really is one of the better stories that the Doctor is in the early adventures in regards to the darkness side of him and how he works, and it's the first proper full delve into the very dark Doctor that the what they call the Cartmel master plan was going to go into, and really is going into the fact that there's a lot of self-doubt to this Doctor, the more than you think, and it comes across very well here. McCoy nails it. He doesn't feel like he's reading it this time. There's a couple of stories early on he felt like he was reading it just a little, but this one he nails it. I love the fact that, you know, it sounds painful when he's in pain. The way he does pain is not comical in this one. It really does hit hard, and a couple of the cliffhangers contain the Doctor in real jeopardy, and it really does hit hard at those moments. We've then got Ace, played by Sophie Aldred. Out of the three leads, I think she's the one that has the least to do. No offence to Sophie Aldred. Sophie Aldred's great what she got, but Ace is kind of like the heavy. She's like the big muscle of this, which shows the character at this stage being a lot more, let's get on with it, let's fight the monsters and let's do good. And it kind of spoils the character of Ace a little bit for me for this one, because I prefer the more flawed teenager. I don't think this older Ace really works as well at this stage with me or in this universe. I don't know, maybe there's other stories within this area that I need to go into, or the Virgin New Adventure, to understand Ace more, but I don't quite get this, really. I don't get it much at all, which I think is a bit strange and a bit weird and a bit sad. Lisa Bauman is probably the best of the two female leads here, with Bernice Summerfield. You can tell she's had a few years playing Bernice. She knows the character. She's the emotional point here. She's effectively the second in command of this one. She's the one that does all the emotional heavy lifting, and Lisa Bauman plays it brilliantly. I think it's a great counterpoint to Ace. I think it really does work for what we need, and there is toughness there from Bernice, but the tough side you see in the audio dramas of Bernice Summerfield is not quite there yet. That's an older Bernice. This is more the younger, more adventurous Bernice, who is still loving her time travelling with the Doctor, and I love the sense of that. I think it's really quite fun. And yeah, Bauman plays the best of the two female leads of here. She just seems to work better with this kind of darkness. I think Ace is more like the heavy here, and it doesn't quite work for me in that respect. Don't get me wrong, it's still not a bad adventure overall. The story is pretty good, and I'll get into some of the elements of that in a minute. But ultimately, you know, I prefer Benny over Ace in this story. We've then got some of the guest cast. We've got Annie Carpenter, played by Holly King. So she's the psychic lady who was supposed to be playing this kind of psychic character, Orm, with all these seances and that. She knows she's a bit of a fraud, and she's trying to make her life out of being a psychic when really there's nothing there. Although obviously there was a little bit of psychicness in her originally, because that's how the Scourge got through. So she did obviously have some sort of sense at one point, and she's just exploited it over the years. And I love the way the doubt comes through when she is a normal human, and how that plays against the others. I think it's quite a sweet little role. It works well for me, and I quite like the way that Annie is portrayed in this story. Yeah, Holly King plays the part well. It's a good, decent part for her, and a good character. We've then got Brian Hughes, played by Lennox Greaves, who is a bigwig businessman who knows the technology of the particle machine that is created by Michael Pembroke. Interesting how the character is a bit more brazen, but he comes into his own playing the leader, the Scourge deputy leader in this story, and I think it's quite a fun little role, and I like the way Brian comes across as a bit of an arrogant so-and-so at the beginning, but obviously near the end he's more contrite. I think Lennox Greaves plays Brian better as the monster than he does as the human in this. It's a nice little role though. He's not quite a plot point, but he is interesting to listen to. We've then got Michael Pembroke, played by Michael Piccirilli. Interesting characterization. Michael Pembroke is the scientist, the one who's got the proton machine. He is an interesting character. He has a bit of self-doubt about himself at times, but he's quite fun, actually. I quite like the character of Michael. I think he's a good foil for Ace at times when he's with her, and a good foil for Benny at times as well, and I think it's really quite a nice little character overall. We've then got Nigel Fairs, plays Gary Williams. I love the fact that Gary's the kind of cross-stitch ahead, and he's stolen the £2,000 funds from the convention, and he feels guilty about that. It's such a small guilt. He comes across as a fairly lovely guy, and it's quite a nice combination we've got there, and I think it's quite fun. I do like the way that it's played by Nigel Fairs. Michael Pembroke is the father of the child that Annie is carrying, and that's an interesting focal point for Benny later on when she's trying to break the Doctor out and stop the Scourge. She uses the hope of the child to kind of break the fear that the Scourge work on. and it's interesting. We then got Peter Trapani, who plays the Scourge leader. You were talking about a monster with voice treatment here. It's played well enough for the content they've got. He comes across with the gravitas you need for it, but, you know, it's a monster at the end of the day. There's not really any background there. In regards to the story itself, it's a nice concept written by Paul Cornell. And this fact that fear can be tapped into by an interdimensional species, and that interdimensional species can feed off the fear and utilise the fear to make humans do things to themselves that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do, like kill people or pull arms off or suffocate themselves by pressing their fingers against two vital arteries. These sort of gory little details you hear would work okay on audio, but they really do fire the imagination sometimes, some of the stuff that happens in it. It's quite a gory adventure to listen to off the back of it, but the concept itself of feeding fear and working on fear, and the fact the Doctor has his own fear as well, the fact that he feels he's inadequate, he's bumbling around the universe trying to look important, but really he's quite feeble and quite small. It's interesting how the fear is played through all the characters. The only one that doesn't really have too much fear that shows is Ace, and Ace seems to be the one that seems to have accepted her own fears about the fact that she feels inadequate, she's bashing monsters up, but that's what she wants to be. It's interesting how that all works out, and I think it's quite a nice little story theme overall. Audio-wise, and the way it's directed by Gary Russell, it's pretty standard Big Finish fare, if I'm absolutely honest. It's not majorly big stuff. It's quite fun. It's quite intriguing. I think it does work for the role itself, and I think ultimately it's not a bad direction here based on what's available. But the story itself is very much based on the fear factor and how fear works. It's very much on that vein. It does make an interesting listen overall, and I think it's quite a nice little sidestep into a slightly different multiverse of Doctor Who here with the Virgin New Adventures, and gives people a taster of what the Virgin New Adventures would have been. And at this point, the adventures themselves have only been around for 10 years, so it's still a fairly recent thing at this point. It's interesting listening to this 22 years after it's released, or 23 years after it's released. It's interesting hearing the dynamics there and how they all work now. And overall, it's okay, it works well. The music-wise, there's not really much music. There is music there, but it's more atmospheric, and this is where Alistair Locke seems to work very well with his atmospheric music. He's quite good at it, and this is no exception. I think it's quite a fun little musical score on here, and it works quite well. Overall, I do like this story. I think it's quite fun to listen to. It's probably not one that you could listen to a lot straight off. It's not one of my favourite Big Finish ones to go for, but it is still a strong enough story to make it not take your brain out, but certainly something justifiably enjoyable to listen to. And for that, I'm going to give it 3.5 TARDISes out of 5. Okay, let's see how that story stacks up with the rest of the Big Finish reviews I've done so far. The Shadow of the Scourge is effectively a middling story, like a lot of the Big Finish audio so far. 3.5 TARDISes is where good stories seem to go and sit. So the Shadow of the Scourge joins the Sirens of Time, Phantasmagoria, the Whispers of Terror, the Fearmonger, the Marian Conspiracy, Red Dawn, and the Fires of Vulcan. At the bottom, there's still 2 stories with 3 TARDISes out of 5. That's The Land of the Dead and Winter for the Adept, or Winter for the Inept as I like calling it. And at the top, there is 1 story with 4.5 TARDISes out of 5. That is, of course, the Apocalypse Element. That's it from me. Thank you very much, guys, for watching and, of course, listening to this Big Finish audio review. Tell me what you think about The Shadow of the Scourge. Leave a comment down below. Do you like it? Leave a comment down below. Do you not like it? Leave a comment down below. And if you like this video as a whole, please like it and share it with the hashtag teamstructor. And please also hit that subscribe button and the notifications bell so you know when a new video comes out. General rule, new video every Sunday at 4 PM GMT. But no, this time there is a video on Wednesday at 6 PM GMT. And that is the Doctor Who review of the 11th Doctor story, Hyde. Hopefully you can join me for that. But that's not all the ways you can help support by liking and subscribing. You can go to the socials, you can go to Instagram, you can go to Twitter, you can go to the Facebook page, or you can go to the Patreon at patreon.com/deanstructor. There is some work going on at the moment about the different tiers, but for as little as £1 a month, you can help support the channel. So if you want to find out more about what's available, go to patreon.com/deanstructor. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching and listening, of course, and until next time, do you know what? I will see you later.